I'm going to take a second and talk about chemtrails. Not because I like talking about chemtrails, certainly not because I like talking about subjects that I find stupid. There are people out there that genuinely believe in chemtrails. I had a conversation over the weekend with somebody who I didn't realize it at the time, but they were obviously serious about it. What happened is we had kind of an open house thing at Marshall. I spent Friday and Saturday talking to hundreds of people that came down from all over the country to tour the campus and had an opportunity to talk about aviation technology and aviation maintenance and career opportunities and the advantages of the aviation industry for communities. And it was a great opportunity. Well, while I was having these conversations, a man approached and said, in all seriousness, he says, when somebody works in aviation maintenance, do they get any kind of insight into chemtrails and stuff? And very flippantly, I responded and said, well, yeah, of course. Well, somebody has to work on the chem pumps, part of the training. That response to me was really funny because there's no such thing as a chem pump. Concept to me is ridiculous. But he didn't really respond to the joke. And I turned around to advance the slide on my PowerPoint. When I turned back around and finished talking to him, he had kind of wandered off. I didn't think much about it, but when I was thinking about his reaction, it was very serious. So I got the impression then that he was, serious about his question, and this was something he obviously believed in, and he didn't appreciate my joking about it. And so I was thinking about that, and then that led me to think about a post I saw a little while back from a guy over in Frankfort, Kentucky. He had pictures of these contrails going over the city, and he says they're spraying extra. They're spraying in Frankfurt today. Everybody, be careful. I was like, okay, so according to this guy's post, every single aircraft that flies over that develops a contrail is part of they. Every aircraft that flies over this, they point to the skies, they have crossing contrails, it's they, and they are spraying. Well, who are they? That's the first question I kind of want to talk about. If you think about where Frankfort, Kentucky is, it's, just west of Lexington, east of Louisville, it's north of Memphis, it's south of Cincinnati. And Louisville, Memphis, Cincinnati, and Wilmington, Ohio, there's a lot of air traffic that goes back and forth over Frankfort because those are major cargo hubs. So you have aircraft crossing that airspace all the time, and they're going back and forth. So there's a lot of activity there if you're looking for it. Every aircraft that operates over, about 26,000 feet is going to develop a contrail. And the contrail is developed because of the way the engine works and the way the engine interacts with the environment around it. So if you don't know how an engine works, I have a great analogy for you. And it's slightly suggestive, but technically accurate. The engine works on 4 simple principles: suck, squeeze, bang, and blow. The air is sucked into the engine. It's brought in and compressed, so it's squeezed down through the compression process, and then it is banged. It is exploded with a fuel air mixture, and then it's blown out the back of the engine. If you have an aircraft that's over 26,000 feet and the air is say negative 26 degrees, you have air going into the engine at negative 26. It's then fed through the compression, the explosion process, and then out the back of the jet engine is coming out between 1300 and 1600 degrees. Depending upon how much moisture is in the atmosphere where the aircraft is operating is how much water is going to get vaporized by that 13 to 1600 degree heat that's coming out of the back of the engine. The air comes out, the heat vaporizes the moisture turns to water and then recrystallizes, and that gives you your contrail, right? The stability of that contrail, how long it lasts, and how robust it is going to be dependent upon the conditions aloft. So if it's really windy, you're going to see that contrail begin to dissipate over time. If there's not a whole lot of moisture in the atmosphere at that point, you're going to see it dissipate more quickly. If there's no wind and there's a lot of water up there, then what's going to happen is that contrail is going to continue extending. You get people who look up in the sky and they see all these aircraft operating at high altitudes, and you have that process where the contrail is developed, and all of a sudden it's they are spraying, they're doing this. So let's talk more about who they are. At any point in time, if you see an aircraft flying over you and that aircraft is developing a contrail, you can literally go to an app on your phone like FlightAware or one of those other apps that nerds like me have on our phones. You can see who operates the airline, who operates the aircraft, who owns the aircraft, what airline they're operating the aircraft for, what altitude they're at, how fast they're going, and where they came from and where they're going. So you know the origin, you know the terminus, you know the type of aircraft, you know the company it works for, you know the elevation, you know everything. If that is a secret aircraft that is spraying chemicals to control your brain, it's really doing a really terrible job, because it tells you exactly who it is. And the other issue that you have to think about with all of this is, if all of these aircraft that are flying over us, every single one of these that develops a contrail behind it, is part of some conspiracy. Tell me about the infrastructure to make sure that all of that secret cabal takes place. You have to have manufacturing, you have to have maintenance, you have to have aftermarket, you have to have innovation, you have to have all of these things that go into the aviation industry would have to also apply to the technology for the chemtrails, and not just the secret Illuminati concoction that they, was it barium and aluminum or something stupid like that. Let's start with the first part. When let's say Boeing makes a new aircraft, which they are making. They're making a new aircraft, or they're going to be making a new aircraft up in Everett. The plans for Boeing's new aircraft is going to be developed at Everett. They know it's there. At some point during the design process of that aircraft, they have to account for chem spray pumps. They have to build that into the plans, because the weight and balance of that aircraft, the operation, the placement of rigging, the placement of hydraulic systems, all of that is part of that design. And so in that design, if they're going to be spraying concoctions out of the aircraft while it operates, the delivery systems have to be in that design. So let's think about the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were involved in that design process. Surely, since the 1940s, since they started, flying, 1950s, since they started doing jet technology, and since contrails first developed behind an aircraft, there would have to be somebody who was involved in the design process, who took into account the chemtrail technology that had to be in the aircraft in order for it to function. Not only would you have to have designers at the OEMs, the original aircraft manufacturers, trying to make plans to house chem spray delivery methods and tanks and, all that other stuff, those will also be included in the manufacturing plans. So you would have to have somebody who's manufacturing all of this specialized chem stuff for all of these different aircraft, and all of the delivery systems would be different. So where the chem pumps fit inside a 767 would be different from where they fit inside an Airbus A380 or A319, which would be different from where the chem tanks and the delivery systems fit on a CRJ 700. All of these aircraft are designed differently, and the layouts on the inside is unique. So for each one of the manufactured aircraft that operates at altitude and gives a chemtrail, each one of those would have to have a subtly different delivery system. Same basic technology, but the design of the aircrafts are different. Therefore, where things are going to fit and how they are going to be rigged is going to be different. So you have design, you have manufacture. Now you have to move on to, what about the aftermarket work? A lot of airlines don't do their own maintenance. And airline maintenance is not done at a super secret location in the Nevada desert like Groom Lake, which, by the way, is not super secret. It's a terrible secret if the government's trying to keep it secret. Everybody knows where it is. It was publicly in. I won't go off about Area 51 because that's another conspiracy. Let's talk about the aftermarket for chemtrails. You would have to have a company that does the maintenance, the heavy checks on an airline. In order to do a heavy check, an aircraft is taken out of service, is brought into a maintenance bay, and the aircraft is taken apart piece by piece, and every single piece is accounted for. And they do eddy current testing on the skin, and they test everything on the aircraft. They rip seats out, they test structures, they test wiring, one wire at a time. And so there would have to be some kind of maintenance policy, a gen fam for that aspect of it. There would have to be some sort of training, some sort of record keeping for these chem pumps, the application systems, the tanks for the chemtrail toxins or whatever. In that maintenance process, there would have to be some way of assuring that those elements of the aircraft are worthy of operation and continue to operate as planned. And so nowhere in the industry has anybody ever come forward to say, hey, I worked for Airborne Maintenance and Engineering in Ohio, and I was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement to take care of the chemtrail juice tanks on this aircraft. There would have to be some kind of maintenance policies. There would have to be some kind of aftermarket to purchase replacements if necessary. There would have to be some kind of company that did it. Now you're getting into the chemtrail conspiracy. We're talking about not just hundreds of people involved in the process. Over the years, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are involved in the process, not only from the beginning of design, but you're talking about manufacture, you're talking about installation, you're talking about routine maintenance, you're talking about replacement, the supply chain on parts and materials. And the larger this concept gets, this idea that airplanes are spraying chemtrails, the more ridiculous it gets. So let's take one more aspect to that on the maintenance side. If you're flying an aircraft at altitude and you are spraying chemicals out of the aircraft for hundreds of thousands of miles over, a few weeks, those chemicals are going to get caught up in the airflow that actually wraps around the aircraft, right? So there's these currents that go around the aircraft. And if you're spraying something out of the wings, what you're going to get is those deposits of whatever that chemical is all over the body of the aircraft. So to do that, to fix that, then you would have to have some sort of maintenance policy to assess how much material is left on the aircraft and clean that aircraft, because that would create a dirty airframe, and dirty airframes create drag, and that causes fuel issues, and you don't want that to happen. But what you don't see when aircraft land, especially chemtrail aircraft, is you don't see them going through wash bays. You don't see anything on the line maintenance to check for, where deposits from, aerial applications are taking place. You don't see any of it. It doesn't exist. There is no record anywhere in the maintenance industry that would give any indication that there's anything like chemtrails anywhere in the world. And if you want to look for a way to kill the conspiracy theory, that's the way to do it. There would have to be some sort of large-scale infrastructure to take care of this, because all of the aircraft that people say are spraying are different. They are owned by different companies. Different companies do the maintenance. Different companies do the aftermarket work. Different companies do the manufacture of specific components. There are so many elements that go into to the industry that being able to apply a control to a conspiracy theory like chemtrails becomes very easy. And the more you look at it, the more ridiculous it gets. Before I go too far, let's take a second. Let's talk about cloud seeding, because I know someone's going to stand up and they're going to screech really loud and they're going to go, well, they're cloud seeding in Omaha, or they're going to say something stupid. Well, yeah, they are cloud seeding in Omaha, and they're cloud seeding in Wichita, and they're cloud seeding in Idaho. But it's not some weird Illuminati QAnon they that are trying to control your mind. Those are primarily college projects and companies that have specialized in that kind of research. And the thing with cloud seeding is they figured out in the 1940s that if you took silver nitrates or something like that, and you introduced them into the environment, the silver nitrate acted as a particulate element, and water would bond to it, and it would form crystalline structures, and then that would collect other water. And so you could actually, in fact, use the silver to artificially create clouds. Years on down the road, they realized that the silver nitrate was like kind of toxic, and so they swapped it out for calcium, some sort of calcium. But the calcium does the same thing, so they pushed that out of the back of an airplane. And the calcium brings water to it, and it forms kind of like a scaffolding in the air for water to bond to. And what you get is you get crystalline structures at altitude in that cold air. That's not a secret conspiracy. Those are very, very open. We know exactly the chemicals that they're using. And more importantly, there's no real evidence that to date cloud seeding operations have ever succeeded in creating rain. It's primarily been large-scale research. And the reason why it's unsuccessful is the environmental factors. It's so very different where you are operating. What is successful in creating cloud structures at a certain altitude during the fall is not going to be the same as the conditions later on in the summer when the air is warmer. So cloud seeding happens, but it's not nefarious. It's actually some really, really, really cool environmental and weather technology and science behind it. It's one of these things where I've seen more people complaining about chemtrails. There's a group of people down in Atlanta that I kind of stalk. I'm a lurker. I'm not actually friends with any of them on Facebook, but they say so much stuff which is mind-blowingly dumb to me that I've kind of named them the chemtrail Karens. But they'll do things like they'll take pictures of the airspace above Hartsfield-Jackson, and there'll be contrails going across Hartsfield-Jackson, because that's an international hub. So you have aircraft moving through that airspace all the time, whether they're going, over to Florida, or they're going north to DC, or they're going to Chicago. Aircraft traverse the airspace all the time. they look at it and they say, well, they're spraying really heavily in Georgia today, or there's contrails above my kid's school. No wonder they have a stuffy nose. But at the end of the day, contrails are the direct result of the way the jet engine interacts with this ambient environment. You have cold air being compressed, exploded, superheated, and then expelled back out into a sub-zero environment. And that sub-zero environment vaporizes the air, it recrystallizes. So that's the contrail. And how long the contrail lasts is dependent upon other environmental factors. How much wind is aloft, how much moisture is in the air. All of those things come into play. And the real point to take away from this is that the chemtrail conspiracy would require the large scale cooperation across industries, across countries, across governments. It would require the absolute silence of hundreds of thousands of aviation maintenance technicians, aircraft designers, aftermarket component manufacturers. All of these people would have to be tacit and be involved and be silent. That is not only unreasonable to believe that takes place in a digital age where everything is leaked, is insane. So don't believe insane things. Laugh it off. Chemtrail believers are only one step below flat earthers, and flat earthers are just about as bad as they get. Laugh it off. Don't believe it. Thanks.